Hello, this is Someone Guy in Hawaii, and today we are looking at elemental damage in Wonderlands. If you are a Borderlands 3 veteran, this table should not be a surprise. Before the uninitiated, this is what this means. Wonderlands has 6 damage types and 4 target types. The damage types are kinetic, lightning, which is shock, poison, which is corrosion, frost, which is cryo, fire, which is fire, and dark magic, which is a lifesteal element. Okay. The 4 health bars are flesh, armor, and shields, just like Borderlands 3, plus bone, which are these gray health bars. Okay. Those 5 different damage types have different buffs or penalties versus each health bar type as shown in the table. Kinetic or non-elemental is the baseline. It does 100% damage against all 4 health bar types. The rest have these listed modifiers. Now, the modifiers for these 4 pairings also vary depending upon our difficulty setting. We'll come back to difficulty in a minute. For now, let's just look at the values for balanced difficulty. Anytime we use a specific damage type against a specific health bar type, the game applies the appropriate modifier. Now, these shooting range targets are flesh types, so on balanced difficulty, a kinetic weapon will do 100% listed damage. This fire weapon does 25% more damage than listed versus flesh. Lightning and poison do 5% less than listed. Frost does 20% less. Dark does 10% less. Again, that's versus flesh on balanced difficulty. Notice that kinetic is always 100% and dark magic is always 90%. With these two, target type doesn't matter. The other 4 vary depending upon the target type. Now, there is always an ideal best case matchup and a worst case scenario. Okay, fire does best against flesh and most poorly against bone. Lightning is best against shields and worst against armor. Poison, good versus armor, bad versus shield. And frost does its best versus bone and its worst versus flesh. All things being equal, we normally want to apply the best element versus each target type. We kill things faster that way, and the faster we kill things, the less chance those things have to kill us first. Of course, all things are rarely equal. We have a weapon that, even though it's not the best element for the target in question, still performs better than another weapon with the preferred element, even after adjusting for the modifiers. Okay, maybe we don't have a weapon with the best element handy, and or it takes too long to swap to the right element. Maybe we're using a weapon with a preferred enchantment. There are lots of possible reasons not to always match the best damage type to the target at hand. Just be aware that the more difficult the content, the more matching element to target type becomes important. Okay, mini bosses and bosses go down faster when we do this. Matching elements becomes even more important going up chaos levels. This can also be very important early on when playing on intense difficulty because Wonderlands has 3 difficulty settings, selectable at any time from the options menu: balanced, relaxed, and intense. Balance is the baseline. The numbers that are shown in the table here with the middle values applied for the 4 pairings noted earlier. Okay, relaxed difficulty applies a 50% boost to all player damage and a 50% penalty to all enemy attacks. Okay, on relaxed, we damage things 15% more easily in addition to the elemental modifiers. And our enemies damage us 50% less easily. Okay, on intense, those modifiers are flipped. Our attacks do 50% less damage in addition to the elemental modifiers, and enemy attacks do 50% more damage to us. There is, however, also an additional modifier for lightning, fire, poison, and frost on relaxed and intense difficulties. Okay, these 4 matchups, which do 80% their listed damage versus specific target types on balanced, will instead do 90 on relaxed. On intense, however, they do 70% instead of 80%. These are the worst case matchups for each element. Okay, the one damage type we normally want to avoid when facing that particular health bar type. Okay, the game is not encouraging us to use the best element here, but it will penalize us if we attempt to use the worst. Okay, the game is telling us that if we insist upon using the absolute worst element for a particular target type, it's going to make it worse on intense difficulty. Okay, on relaxed difficulty, it gives us a break. Okay, these tables here show the actual total modifiers applied at each difficulty setting. That's the elemental damage modifiers plus the extra 15% on relaxed and the minus 15% on intense. This is how much of our listed damage we actually do on relaxed and intense. Okay, so you can see how much more those 4 matchups suffer. Okay, we do maybe a little bit more than half of what's listed. So something to keep in mind, especially when playing on intense difficulty. Now, for Borderlands 3 veterans, these modifiers are toned down compared to Borderlands 3, especially compared to TVHN, but they are still important. Okay, that's the basics of matching elements to health bars. Let's talk about status effects and damage over time briefly. Every element except kinetic, which is non-elemental, can proc a status effect that, in addition to the initial damage hit, causes damage over time, or dot. I'm going to use dot instead of damage over time a lot from here on out. These numbers here bubbling up after the initial hit, that's what dot is. Okay, that's damage over time. The damage is listed here on the stat card, but applied in thirds 3 times a second. So if we take these numbers, divide by 3, and apply any elemental modifier adjustments, we get these numbers. Not exact, they vary up and down a few points. Okay, dots are not guaranteed, but RNG driven. Every time we hit with an elemental attack, guns, melee, spells, etc., the game generates a random number. If that number is less than the percentage chance to hit listed here, we proc a status effect. A 25% chance, for instance, means that on average we dot once every 4 hits, on average. Okay. Dot damage can also crit, something that does not happen in Borderlands 3. This is status effect crit chance. Player base chance is 5%, but skills and specific gear stats can modify this. Okay. All dots in Wonderlands last 5 seconds, which differs from Borderlands 3. BO3 dot duration vary depending upon the element. Wonderlands makes it easy. 5 seconds for everybody. Ignore what it says on this detail tab. This is an exact transfer of the description for Borderlands 3. Only the name of the element has been changed. That listed duration was also wrong and never fixed. It was not 2 seconds in BO3. It was not 2 seconds in Wonderlands. It's 5 seconds. Okay. This also includes frost. Cryo in BO3 cannot do damage over time. In Wonderlands, in addition to slowing and freezing, it can also dot. 5-second duration like all the others. Now, dots that appear to last more than 5 seconds either have extended duration due to skills or gear, or are actually multiple dots that proc in succession. Okay, 1 dot procs, and then before the 5 seconds are up, another dot procs and replaces the first dot. Okay, I say replaces because unless the mechanics have changed since BO3, dots from any particular source type cannot stack. We don't get multiple dots from one source stacking on top of each other. If we could, dots would be ridiculously powerful. They'd break the game. Okay, I've linked a more detailed explanation of this mechanic from Borderlands 3 in the description below. Now, that video also explains multiple simultaneous dots from different source types. We can have multiple dots of different elements going at the same time, but not the same element unless those dots originate from different source types, meaning guns, spells, pets, skills, etc. We can have a fire dot procced by a gun, another by a spell, another by skill, all going at the same time, but not 2 fire dots from 2 separate guns. Okay, I only tested this briefly, but it appears to be the same as with Borderlands 3. The spell shot's ambidextrous skill, by the way, actually suffers from this restriction. We can cast 2 different spells of the same element, one after another, but if both proc status effects, only 1 dot will actually occur and do damage. The rules governing which dot wins out are explained in the linked video. This kind of sucks, but Spell Shot is pretty powerful even without it, so I've never noticed it happening, or in the case of Spell Shot not happening until I tested it. I suspect most people won't even notice it either. Additional info on Frost. I mentioned the lightning description being a direct transfer from BO3. The same goes for the Frost description concerning how slowing and freezing works. It's also misleading because freezing an enemy is not about remaining health as described here, but rather how much cold damage we actually do. This is tied to cryo, in this case, frost efficiency. Unlike BL3, however, Wonderland stat cards don't list frost efficiency, which means actually figuring out and testing it will be very time consuming unless somebody eventually pulls that data from programming code, okay, or they start listing it. I've linked a couple of BO3 videos explaining cryo efficiency in the link below if you wish to dig into it. But again, you won't be able to make much use of the info unless or until we find out what item frost efficiency is, okay. One last bit about dark magic. This is a new element that does lifesteal. The lifesteal ability is not instantaneous. It creates projectiles which have to get back to us to heal us, okay? And how much healing depends on damage and 2 new concepts, dark magic leech and dark magic efficiency. I have yet to investigate, test, and understand how this works. When I do, I'll let you know in a future video. And that's it. And that's a lot for the uninitiated. If you're overwhelmed, don't sweat it. Start by trying to match the best element for each health bar type. Pick the rest up as you go, but don't let it interfere with your enjoyment of the game. And as always, stay safe. And thanks for watching.